All right, good morning, AP humans. This will be part 1 of your Unit 5, Agricultural and Rural Land Use Patterns and Processes. If you need to print off your own copy of the template at home, use that teal link on the slideshow that is also posted to Schoology. Okay, agricultural practices are influenced by our physical environment and climate. Basically, depending on the temperature, depending on the type of landforms around, are going to impact what can be grown there. 2 types of farming practices you need to know. These are in your notes: intensive farming and extensive farming. Make sure you guys are good on knowing those. Okay, Mr. Singh video for you to watch here. Definitely give you, or definitely need you to watch that, get some good information about this introduction stuff. Okay, again, it is influenced by the physical environment. So obviously, depending on the type of plant it is, it needs certain light, water, nutrients, temperature. So obviously, from a geography perspective, location matters here. Where things are grown, there's certain crops that just can't be grown in certain parts of the world. Okay, you do need to be aware of the general climate zones. Guys, basically, the way this works is that in the middle, you have the equator, and pretty much along the equator and up and down, you get into like that hot tropical, it's humid, they have the same temperature kind of year round. Then the band above that and below that, notice that this is a pattern, right? So if you have the equator, the climates have a pattern up to the poles, on both sides, okay? So as you go up into the temperate zone, this is, you'll see where most of North America is, certainly Colorado. This is seasonal. You actually get seasons, and it, the temperatures vary. And then, of course, you get into your north and then your Arctic, and that's going to be your polar climates. Okay. Hide myself as far as I can over here. There we go. That looks good. All right. Agriculture is influenced by the physical environment. Again, make sure you guys have a rough understanding of just like what the climate type is, and then like what can be grown there. And then obviously with modern technology, we've kind of usurped some of those climates and said, well, we can grow tropical fruit in a colder area because we have a greenhouse. But understand, like, from just like a physical perspective, how this is where these crops can be. Okay, page 210 in your AMSCO book, you definitely want to be aware of this chart. This gives a whole list. These are a lot of the vocab terms you have for this unit. Agricultural practice, where they usually practice it, the locations here, and then again, how the climate impacts that. All right, human modifications. We have learned to clear the room. We have given artificial grow lamps. We can irrigate water to where water wasn't before. Yes, we can use artificial fertilizer or pesticides to keep the pests away. We can heat things or cool things. Remember, going way back to Unit 1, this idea of possibilism and environmental determination. This is certainly possibilism. Humans, anything's possible if you're a human, so we can make technology to grow things that we usually couldn't grow in certain places. Okay. Some plants are constrained by the environment. And so this goes back to that concept of economies of scale. So like Mediterranean and tropical crops really can only be grown there in certain places because the climate needed can be reciprocated, but it's expensive. So to make like a super, super, super warm, humid, tropical place to grow pineapple in Colorado, for example, it's just not going to be cost effective. So it's just it is more cost effective to just get it from its source. Okay. All right. Climate affects agriculture. Which of the following best explains the importance of climate to agricultural practices? So take a minute and look at these options. You might want to pause. Boom. Mid-latitude climates tend to support similar agricultural crops and practices such as wheat farming across the United States and Canada. All right. Takeaway. Agriculture is dependent on the climate and physical geography. Crops are obviously grown best in the climate and the soil that supports like its native area, but humans do have the ability to modify that. And again, it is your job as a geographer to understand how and where humans have modified the earth to make agriculture easier. Okay. Intensive and extensive practices. Again, you guys have got to be familiar with this. Intensive, large amount of labor and capital. You need to have a lot of workers. These are usually smaller plots of lands located like near a large population. These are high yield per acre. So like rice, milk, truck farming, these are going to be examples of crops that are needed, like a human touch is needed to like pick it or like separate it out. Whereas extensive agricultural are low capital and labor inputs. And these are going to be large plots of lands away from population areas, low yield per acre. Shifting cultivation, livestock ranching, like cattle ranching, requires so much land, but there's not really a lot of humans needed because once you just put the cattle on the land, they just take care of themselves. Okay. Farmers must decide on how to farm based on financial considerations. So how expensive is the land? Expensive land means the farmer can't obviously probably buy as much and must generate sufficient revenue to make money off that land. So if they're on a pretty pricey piece of land, their crop better yield enough money for them to basically keep paying for that. And then the cost of labor. So we know here in the United States, because of wage laws, minimum wage, that we American farm workers get a higher wage. So you have to consider that. This is enter why we do have a high migrant worker population who can come in undocumented. The farmers can pay them less than they would have had to pay like a citizen counterpart, and therefore creates a bigger profit margin. Okay. And then I know it's a little cut off down here, but cost of machinery, obviously a state of the art GPS robot run combine is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars versus a human and maybe an ox pulling a cart doing that same process. Okay. Again, this is in AMSCO. It breaks down again. This is like the third slide we've seen with intensive versus extensive. You guys definitely need to be familiar with what this means. Okay. All right. Plantation agricultural, mixed crop and livestock, and market gardening are all types of intensive agriculture. Again, intensive means you have to have a lot of people to do it and make it happen. Okay. Whereas extensive is going to be the shifting cultivation, like you might only be working on one chunk of area at a time. Rainforest, like clearing and burning it and then having like new crops pop up in that soil. Herding, so when herders are herding their cattle, sheep, and goats. And then ranching is obviously going to be like the big scale, like we have cows, we're fattening them up to take them to the market. Okay, pause on this one. You guys can read through this one and answer. All right. And again, big takeaway. Farmers make economic decisions based on plot size, labor costs, and machinery. Intensive farming involves small plots and high yields, and it's your job as a geographer to understand the types of farms that exist. Okay, that was all 5.1. 5.2, settlement patterns and survey methods. So much like boundaries where humans have gone in and said, hey, this is now this country, this is my water, whatever it is. Same thing is obviously done on a smaller scale when it comes to like dividing up where like farming and ranching is going to happen. Okay. So big things you're going to hear on this section is going to be about settlement patterns, and then how they've surveyed this land to like basically ensure whose is whose. Okay. All right. So take a minute and look at these. These are two different rural land patterns. So what do you notice here? Okay. Oops. Sorry. So obviously we're going to have, this one is very, very rectangular. And then this one is going to be like long, skinny, kind of more little awkward shapes. And we'll talk about that. Okay. So rural settlement patterns. So basically, throughout human history, when they have developed like a town or a city, this is the way that the houses have been settled. And I know this seems strange to put in our rural farming unit, but I promise it connects in a minute. So the first one over here, clustered settlement. This was basically old European villages. They were, as you can see, the houses were clustered together. And the idea was to create that sense of community. Then over here, we have what's called the dispersed settlement. This is going to be more of like a North American rural area. Remember, we're not talking about cities. We're talking about like little towns. These are more connected to the farmland and resources. So like each of these individual houses, that whole like rectangle could be their farm. So they might stick their house, somewhere in the middle of the farm, and then they have that like buffer between them and their neighbors. Kind of a good idea. And then linear, this is going to be, again, when you start to have like a main transport system, maybe a railroad or a river or a road comes through, and the houses are built as close to that line of transportation as possible, which makes sense as well. All right. Rural survey methods. And yeah, I know this seems, whoops, like really, Ms. Shepard's like, why? But College Board asked us to have you know it, so here we go. So survey methods, meets and bounds, that is using short distances or landmarks to identify land. And this is kind of like back in the day where it's like, okay, hey, me and my neighbor have agreed that from here to the tree is my land, and then from the tree to the rock is his. Cool. Then you get into the long lot system, and this was this was first established in France, so they call it the French long lot system. This is basically those long, if you remember that slide a couple before, those long, skinny, kind of awkward shaped plots, but every single one of them had at least a little bit of access to a river, which is important because remember, water is valuable. We looked at that in Unit 4. If you have access to the water, you can get onto trade and transportation routes, and obviously for farming practices, you need that to irrigate. So that long lot system is like like the river is like squiggling through, and all the little farms literally have just a little sliver of the river shoreline. This one, township and range, this actually is more of like the North American model. We definitely saw this in our countries, like during westward expansion. So they would use that grid system. So they would have like the baselines. They just basically turn it into a grid and just say, okay, every grid, somebody gets X amount. The land ordinance of 1785, you can look here, basically a grid pattern of a township. So 6 miles by 6 miles would be like the township. And then they would divide it into 36 squares. Each square was 640 acres, which basically comes out to a square mile of land. And again, that could be something that you farmed or, you ranched on or whatever. All right, here's an example. Okay, so real examples, little clustered village. Again, you guys can see the real picture here and then the little animation here. So again, everything is close together for one-stop shopping or, just that sense of community. Tie this back to Unit 3 on culture. What often was in the middle of a village or a town? A church, you got it. Maybe the church was built and then they'd build all the houses right around it. And then the con, you're far away from the farmland and potentially other resources. Okay. And then again, here's a real picture of that. And look at that. What's right in the middle? The church with a little cemetery all around it. Okay. Dispersed village. People were tired of going to and from their farmland. So they said, how about I just live in the middle of my farmland? There we go. Wow, that got cut off. Okay, cool. Well, you guys can see all the way up here. Again, you can see an example of that. Okay, a linear village. Good thing about this, you obviously have like quick access to that transportation route, but it could take longer to get goods and services from one area to another. And then here's an example. You can't get more classic than that. Okay, how do these land patterns connect with survey methods? So when we talked about like meets and bounds survey, township and range, and then that French long lot system. So these are all 3 different survey patterns found in North America. So meets and bounds was the method of land description, which involves identifying distances to make use of the physical boundaries and measurements. So again, that's hey, from here to that tree is mine, and from the tree to the river is yours. Township and range, again, that's that grid system. And they literally superimposed a human grid onto the surface of the earth and then said every one of these squares is somebody's home or town or whatever it is. And then the long lot system, again, everybody gets a little share of the river. So say this like squiggly line here is the river. They would make all these really long, skinny plots, but everybody had access to that river. Okay, more on the meets and bounds. You guys can take a minute and pause here and look about how this is calculated. Okay. Lots of stuff on meets and bounds here. Wow, look at, dun, dun, dun. So cool. All these little landmarks that are drawn up. And then again, I get my little plot. Okay, township and range. It's the grid pattern. You guys can see that. If you've ever flown over the Midwest, the flyover states, you see this a lot. Sometimes you also see circular shaped ones. Why is that? Because the irrigation machines, it's like a giant sprinkler. It sprinkles in a circle. That's why you get those circular patterns within like a square, because it just doesn't reach the corners of the lot. Things you learn. French long lot, again, there we go. And you can see here's a great example of that. Okay. All right. Oops, sorry. Practice question for you. Which of the following land survey systems is shown in the satellite image? Township and range. It is like a perfect grid system. Okay. Again, takeaway, got to know what the difference between a clustered, dispersed, and linear settlement is, and then understanding how like the meets and bounds, the long lot survey, and township and range could have been used to influence those patterns. All right, 5.3. Origins and diffusions. So basically, you need to understand, whoops, my bad, the hearths of agriculture. Oops, so you can see that. Yep, Carl Sauer and the hearths of agriculture. So you need to understand like where major centers of plant and animal domestication happen. So historically, Fertile Crescent, Indus River Valley, Southeast Asia, Central America. And then diffusion. How did those things spread to the rest of the world? Columbian Exchange, agricultural revolutions, and then global relocation and spread. Okay. Agriculture developed in different areas in the world. This is what are we going to learn here? Several different hearths around the world. Hearth is a center. Plants and animals were domesticated or made for human use. Like we learned how to tame them or breed them to use for ourselves. And then plants and animals spread around the world as a result of diffusion over time. Okay. All right. So again, know this. This is from I believe AMSCO has the same chart. So here's the list of the hearth where it started. These are old school, Fertile Crescent, Southeast Asia, et cetera, et cetera. What was crop cultivated there? And then where did they go? And so again, you guys don't need to memorize this, but be familiar with just those patterns. Remember, this class is all about like, where did things maybe come from? Where'd they go? Why'd they do that? Patterns. Okay. Nice little map. You guys have this in AMSCO as well. And you guys can see here again where the hearth started. So the turquoises, the purples, and then the red is going to be its route. Like where did it go? And again, this makes sense. Things that were cultivated in Central America makes sense that they first went into either North America or South America because that's geographically made sense. Again, Southwest Asia, we know that this hearth here got connected through trade and like empire, right? At this point, the Roman Empire, the Greeks. I mean, this was that. So again, you guys will want to be just familiar, again, knowing the patterns of where this was. All right. Increasing patterns of globalization have diffused agriculture around the world. Well, yes, we know this. Again, when in doubt in this class, if you can tie it back to money or even like just like modernization, like we have technology now that allows us to transport things further than ever before. We can make our own like greenhouses or synthetic farming environments to grow things that we used to only be able to get from one place. So again, I jumped ahead, sorry. Historically, knowing that the Silk Road, you guys will have heard about this, I think, or learn about it next year for sure. This is the one that brought plants and animals through Central Asia, Middle East, and Europe. The Indian Ocean obviously became a huge trade vessel for those populated parts of the world. And then the Columbian Exchange is going to be once the Spanish conquered Mesoamerica, which is Central America, and South America, they diffused those plants to and from the area. So they would bring back things to Europe, like, wow, we ate this, incredible plant in Central America, and now we're bringing it back to the king or queen in Spain. Okay, cool little thing here again on the Columbian Exchange, and you can see kind of the back and forth of this. Oops, my bad. So again, just being aware of like, we know things originated possibly in the old world and they were brought over to the new world. And then that cycle just starts back, that things that were being found in Mesoamerica were now being sent back over to Europe. It was just a big circle. And these things also included diseases. All right, trade routes, again, you don't have to memorize these. I just can't emphasize enough just understanding that there was hearths of where things started, and then understanding that through trade, colonization, imperialism, those things dispersed. Wow, sounds like how languages and religions also got places. All right, other forms of diffusion. Getting a little click happy here. Okay, population migration brings new food to new places. So migrants that are maybe coming from their motherland to their new world, to the new world country, they brought their food because they may have escaped the war, but they didn't want to escape the delicious food. So they brought it with them, okay? The Green Revolution, that is actually going to help us get more crop varieties around the world. So new varieties of plants and animals, like in Mexico and India, for example, because of the technologies of the Green Revolution, use of, fertilizers and pesticides, greenhouses, irrigation allows those countries to start growing things they would have never been able to grow before. And then increasing wealth has raised the demand for animal protein. So eating beef and pork and chicken, you have to have money for those things. Those are expensive. And so the more global money there is, like the more people around the world have to spend, they're able to use that money. They have a demand of, well, I don't want to have to eat wheat anymore. I want pork. And so they can infuse that market with that. Okay, you'll want to pause on this one to do this. Which of the following best explains diffusion of animals and plants? Pause, and then there's your answer. Oops. There's your answer. All right, what's our takeaway, guys? Plants and animals have diffused across the world, just like everything else, language and religion, and plants and animals. It is so extensive, these ingredients have become integral to cultural cuisine. So it's like modern, like if you go to a country now, chances are they're using something in it that they were given maybe 1,000 years ago that is just stayed part of their culture. And again, it's your job as a geographer to understand the diffusion of plants and animals from their hearths around the world. Okay, 5.4. Hey, look, it's our buddy Thanos again. Look at that guy. Hey. All right, impact of technology and the use of land in this one. The second agricultural revolution. So we've moved beyond subsistence farming of I can just farm to feed me and maybe my kids and my wife to we're making buku bucks. We're doing this on a huge, global scale. All right, second agricultural revolution. Great Britain in the 18th century, which would have been the 1700s, direct connection to the Industrial Revolution as things became like invented and mechanized. That's obviously going to change the way that we can produce our agriculture. So why there? Coal was being imported in Great Britain. So as a result, there was obviously some sort of technology in place to be able to get that coal from its origin to Great Britain for being used. Okay, page 198 in your AMSCO. Again, early advances in modern agriculture. Guys, don't memorize this. You just need to understand when you invented something like an iron or steel plow, here's what it did. It reduced human labor, breaks through harder soils, increase the amount of crops grown per acre, increase farm sizes. And obviously those trends are going to be kind of all the way down here. These inventions, again, were designed to have less people be able to use that machinery and then output even more than ever before. Okay, clearing the land. Check this out. The steel plow. This was state of the art, and then all of a sudden, this is what they use today. And again, this tractor is obviously way more preferable, probably, than this. But understand, you've got to have some cash to put up for this. So if you're in a developing world, you might still be using something like this. Okay. A reaper. These are the things, these are like those, like, there's that great meme. I think I've talked about it in class where it's like, what a killer rock concert. And it was actually just one of these, like at night plowing through the field. But again, look at the differences here. Obviously you have 5 or 6 men, and then you have some horses, beasts of burden. They do the burden of the work, going through and doing that. And then look, you have one dude probably has this thing on GPS. He's probably blasting some great country music, mowing his way through this. Not that it's not hard work, it's just different work. Okay, seed drill. This is cool. This is how they actually get the seeds into the ground. If you've ever planted a garden, this is a labor-intensive task. Like you have to dig a little hole, drop the seed in, cover it back up, and you do that hundreds and hundreds of times. So here is the actual advancement or the invention of it, and you can see there's these little literally little pointy dagger things, and the seeds would just drop in from those little pointy, so it would punch a hole and drop the seed in at the same time. And then we have the mechanized version of that today. Okay, grain elevators. Hey, storing. So it's one thing to be able to harvest a bunch of food, but if you can't store it, it's no good. These are all over the Midwest, all over eastern Colorado. Basically every small town, you can tell you're coming up onto it from the highway or whatever, because you can see the grain silo that is poking out. Okay. Advancement allowed more production and more storage. So this actually just shows over time, and I know it's a little cut off on the bottom. This starts at 1850 and goes to 2014, just how much yield has increased of these wheat products. These are all throughout Europe. And then obviously if you yield this much, yes, there are that many more mouths to feed it, but it needs to be stored somewhere as well. So the technology needed to store things so it didn't go bad is important as well. Okay. The second agricultural revolution happened alongside the Industrial Revolution for a reason. I mean, things that were born from the Industrial Revolution impacted this second agricultural revolution. All right, check this out. Calories consumed. So if we tie this, because we're able to produce more, people have more access to food. Therefore, we eat more. Daily per capita supply of calories. I mean, of course, it shouldn't surprise you. The United States is like at the complete top of this. You can see on this chart, and this is 1705 down here to 2013, you can definitely see where there was like dips in supply. So there was maybe a drought or some sort of pestilence that came in to disrupt the crop for that season. Okay. Obviously, as a result, because we can eat more, even though it sounds counterproductive, because we know, especially in America, we eat things that kill us, but whatever, it tasted good. But here, the life expectancy has just increased because overall in the world, we're getting more food. Okay. Technologies invented during which of the following periods explain how farmland was divided and cultivated, shown in the satellite image. Again, you'll want to pause and you can do these questions on your own. Okay. Advancements in agriculture. Here's your big takeaway. We've gotten more food. The demand for manual labor has shifted. We don't need as many people working anymore. We need people to work the machines. Therefore, our life expectancy has increased because we're eating more, and the gap between core and periphery countries, which is like a Unit 7 concept we're going to talk about, is getting bigger, unfortunately. All right, 5.5, the Green Revolution, high-yielding, disease-resistant, faster-growing crops. This is enter GMOs. This is the part that everyone kind of freaks out about, but believe me, there's some good that has come out of this. Rice, wheat, corn. We've doubled the size of crops, new machinery and new technology, and therefore the direct result of that is we have higher supply, so therefore we can lower the price of those things. And more people have access to more food. That's a good thing. Maybe a potential downside of this is going to be the environmental impact. We've cleared land for farming that would have maybe been used for something else. The impact on use of pollution and fossil fuel use of pollution, the creation of pollution is of concern. Okay, the Green Revolution created new methods of agriculture. So again, biggest probably of this is using hybrid crops. So you blend two crops together to make a super crop. And then GMOs, those genetically modified organisms. And in reality, when you're blending two crops together, a hybrid, isn't that a GMO, right? Like you might not have been like chemically rewriting its DNA, but you certainly were messing with its DNA by hybriding them, okay? The use of chemical pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers sure has produced positives in like the amount of stuff that's grown and keeping crops alive that may have previously been destroyed by some sort of pestilence. But the downside of this obviously is the use of these chemicals. What are the long-term and short-term effects of that on health and soil and whatnot. It diffused agricultural machinery and modern technology practices around the world. Okay. Hybrid plants, they're bred to have superior characteristics. Again, you can read through this. And then as a GMO is the actual changing the genes of the plant. That's when you go in and like manipulate. Hybrid just blends them together. People, since the first person who planted corn, has probably been doing some sort of a hybrid because it didn't take them long maybe to realize like, oh, hey, if I put these two in the same hole to grow, it comes faster, or accidentally a seed fell in and then they're like, wow, that was actually awesome. We know here in the United States, especially, I should say globally, people are a little skeptical of GMOs, and I get it, but I think it's also important to know that we would have massive crop shortages, massive food shortage situations globally if it wasn't for GMOs. So don't be too negative on them, but do your research. Okay, so again, chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, chemical fertilizers. Again, read through here. We know what they do. We know that they can be good, and then we know that they can obviously have some damages or cause some damage as well. Okay, the new farming methods, again, new machinery for planting and harvesting crops. Irrigation methods, this is probably a huge thing. So here's an example of a big, huge water irrigator. And you've seen these if you've ever driven like in the Midwest or in the Eastern Colorado or Western Colorado. We can bring water to places that didn't typically have enough water. and therefore increasing crop yields left and right. And then advances in transportation makes it easier to get those crops to a global market. So again, I can harvest a bunch of stuff here. We can get it on a truck, and then it's at its market within a couple of days, or it's on a ship being shipped across the world. Just exact case in point. Last night, we love like basmati and jasmine rice. That comes from Southeast Asia. I can buy a giant bag of it at Costco, and that obviously got here somehow through some modern transportation. Okay, positive and negative effects, just like anything. So again, you'll want to read through this, the good that has come from this green revolution and the negative that has come from this. So if you need to pause to read this and fill out that or look at that chart, do that. Okay, little quiz here. Between 1950 and 1990, wheat production in India in average pounds per acre more than tripled, which allowed it to meet its need for food. Which of the following best explains this change? The use of large farms, tractors, and combine harvesters. So see, that's a good thing. People in India got food that may not have typically had it. Okay, the Green Revolution has changed global agriculture. New methods have resulted in greater food security and less starvation globally. That's good. Positive and negative effects on the environment and humans. That's sketchy. And it is your job as a geographer to understand the short and long-term effects of this around the world. Okay, last one for part 1, 5.6. Woot, woot. We're almost there, guys. Agricultural production regions. Oh, I lost my little mouse there. Okay. This is going to be kind of more of an economics perspective of growing crops or having dairy and how that affects that. So you guys need to understand that agricultural regions are defined by what they produce or what practices are being used to produce it. And then intensive and extensive farming practices. Remember, intensive needs a lot of people. Extensive is going to be more like the cows do their own work. The cow walks itself to the field, or you have a herder with its sheepdog that does maybe the thing, but you don't need a ton of people. A huge takeaway you guys need to know from this is the bid rent theory. That's this diagram right here. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay, subsistence versus commercial agriculture. Guys, commercial agriculture, purposeful crops are grown for profit. Usually it's monocropping. That's one of your vocab words. So I might specialize in growing soybeans, and that's all I grow. Subsistence farmers are ones that are going to grow on a much smaller level, and they might be growing crops just to provide food for their immediate family or their close community. There also is going to be a comparison of how many workers are there employed as farmers, how many machines are used to farm, what is the size of the actual farm, and then how are they related to other businesses? And you'll see that tease out here in a minute. Okay, workforce employed in agriculture. So check this out. Even though we know the United States is probably one of the highest per capita producing farmlands in the world, we are the lightest color blue, which is basically 0 to 5% of our workforce is farmers. So we don't have a lot of farmers, but what do we have that makes us have lots of crops and yield? Machinery and technology. Yeah, very good, you guys. Awesome. Then you get into other parts of the world, sub-Saharan Africa. God, we see this pattern all the time, don't we? We often see these world maps where North America, Europe, maybe you're sharing similar colors. Australia usually pops in with us. And then you always see maybe a difference in the data with sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia. Oh my gosh, it's all connected. Okay. But again, sub-Saharan Africa, high percentage of people in the workforce. Okay. All right, types of machines. Again, we know this. I love this map. The tractors used in agriculture per 100 square kilometers of arable land. The darkest reds are going to be more tractors, and then the lighter yellows and the whites are going to be 0 to no tractors. So again, you get sub-Saharan Africa either is using very little tractors or none. America, we're kind of right. We're still in the lower end of it.
Hey, Trojan.
I mean, you can see how that goes through. Sorry, the pledge is happening in the back, but I'm not stopping. All right, farm size. Farms, land and farms and average acres per farm. How has this grown over time? This is in the United States. So again, look at the bottom here, starting in 1850 all the way up to 2017. And you guys can see the average land and farms actually hasn't changed too much. That's always kind of been the same. Here's what's really interesting. The amount of farms has absolutely decreased, and the average size of farms has increased. So we can hypothesize here that even though The land of farms has not changed. The amount of private, smaller family-owned farms has decreased, probably because they got bought up by larger conglomerate corporations that have been able to grow their individual farm size. Okay, U.S. agricultural outputs, inputs, and total factor productivity. Basically, the way you read this is the agricultural output. You can see this blue, the dark blue line is a steady increase over the years. Total factor productivity is obviously going right along with that pattern. Total farm inputs. This is like how much like new technology and stuff are they putting in. The weird part is that actually hasn't probably changed too much, but clearly the amount of productivity has increased. So the efficiency of using pesticides or using, they're not having crop failures, or they have technology, they can store products that don't go bad. All those factors can play into this. Okay, agribusiness, big money here, guys. Oh my gosh, let me move myself all over the place, shall I? Okay, practice question for you. Production of agricultural products destined primarily for direct consumption by the producer rather than for market is called subsistence agriculture. So again, this is the family who grows their own little farm to eat, or grows their own little garden to eat for themselves. They're not selling it for profit or anything like that. I want to back up one because I just want to make sure I didn't skip something here. Agribusiness, I think this is one of your no terms. This is just, again, that concept of, I saw an interview with a farmer not too long ago. He's young, and he said, it was interesting when I went to school to study to be a farmer. He goes, I didn't realize I was actually studying business more than actual farming techniques. So again, this is a multi, probably $1 trillion industry to make massive money. They know people need food, and so obviously businesses capitalize on that. All right. Okay. Takeaways: subsistence versus commercial ag. Again, what is the difference here? How are they different? Purpose, crops, machines, land use, and productivity. You guys need to know that. So if you need to take a minute and get more of that written down, do that now. Okay. That's it for part 1 of the notes. You guys are awesome. I will talk to you later.